44-year-old nurse Tracy Wilemon didn't show up for her shift. Her co-workers knew something was wrong. She was new at the nursing home, but she was reliable, punctual, and never missed a day. Her boss called her landlord to check on her. He unlocked the door, stepped into the quiet apartment, and walked into a nightmare. Tracy lay naked on the bedroom floor, covered in blood, a handgun nearby. She'd been tortured, stabbed, and brutally assaulted. Tracy Wilemon was born on September 29, 1966, in California. She grew up close to her dad, her brother, and later her cousin Tanya. When Tracy was 14, her parents split up, and she moved with her father and brother to Riverside. That's where she met her best friend and future stepsister, Trish. The three girls, Tracy, Tanya, and Trish, were inseparable. They roller skated, went shopping, tried horseback riding, and dreamed about their futures. Over time, life pulled them closer in an unexpected way. Trish's mom eventually married Tracy's dad. Best friends became family. After high school, Tracy and Trish trained as nurses together and worked side by side. Tracy built a reputation as caring, hardworking, and dependable. She later married, had a daughter named Kristen, and moved between states chasing better opportunities. Life, however, kept knocking her down. Her first marriage ended. Then, in a short span of time, her family was hit with multiple losses. Her own brother and three half-siblings died suddenly, leaving Tracy's father and stepmother to raise the children they left behind. In 2009, Tracy remarried and moved to Tennessee, but that relationship also collapsed within a year. She eventually moved to Alabama, where Tanya helped her get a job at a nursing home. Tracy rented a small place nearby, took the bus when she couldn't afford a car, and saved every extra dollar to buy a vehicle and visit her grown daughter. She had survived divorce, grief, and financial struggle. She was trying to rebuild. That's where her story should have changed for the better. Instead, it walked straight into horror. October 13, 2010. Tracy didn't come in for her shift. For some people, that might not mean much, but for Tracy, it was a red flag. Her coworkers called her landlord, who lived on the property. He went over, knocked several times, got no answer, and finally used his spare key. Inside, the apartment was quiet. No sign of a struggle in the living room, no overturned furniture. But when he walked into the bedroom, he froze. Tracy lay on the floor, naked, with blood on her head and multiple injuries. He ran outside and called 911. When police arrived, the scene made it clear. This was no medical emergency. This was a homicide. Tracy had been stabbed in the back, slashed across the throat, and showed signs of a prolonged, violent assault. Defensive wounds on her hands suggested she'd fought hard to survive. The medical examiner later confirmed she'd died from blood loss and had been brutally sexually assaulted. Forensic teams collected DNA samples from her body, swabs from around the house, and blood from various surfaces. They sent everything to the lab, but the backlog meant results would take weeks. There was no sign of forced entry. That suggested something chilling. Whoever did this, Tracy either knew or trusted enough to let inside. In Tracy's bedroom, police found a handgun on the floor near her body. There were no gunshot wounds, so why was it there? Was it hers? Did she try to defend herself? Or did the killer bring it and never fire? Talking to family and friends, detectives learned Tracy had recently been worried about a man named Richardson who kept showing up around the property and acting strangely. Tanya's boyfriend, James, had given Tracy a gun for protection. Police moved quickly on Richardson. He was indeed odd and a bit suspicious, but after checking his alibi, it held up. He hadn't been anywhere near Tracy's home when she was killed. That lead collapsed. Detectives turned back to the people closest to her. They retraced Tracy's last known day. That morning, Tanya's boyfriend, James, had driven Tanya and Tracy to the nursing home to pick up their paychecks. From there, they went to the bank to cash them, then stopped at a used car lot. Tracy had finally saved enough and had her eye on a car she'd seen on the dealer's website. She liked it and planned to buy it soon. After that, James and Tanya dropped her off at home. As far as anyone knew, that was the last time she was seen alive. While talking with family, the lead detective noticed something odd. James had a deep, fresh cut on his pinky. From experience, the detective knew that type of injury often shows up in knife attacks when a hand slips on a bloody blade. When asked, James brushed it off, said it happened at home. But the combination of the cut and his handgun being found near Tracy's body was hard to ignore. James and Tanya both told police the same story at first. They dropped Tracy off after the car lot and went straight home. They stayed in for the rest of the day. No drama, no detours. Detectives checked everything. Bank footage showed the three at the ATM. Employees at the nursing home and the car lot confirmed seeing them together. The timeline matched, up to the moment they dropped Tracy at her place. Still, the presence of James's gun in Tracy's bedroom kept him on the radar. Out of frustration, the lead detective brought him back in and went straight for a key question. Had anything sexual happened between him and Tracy? It was a strategic move. If James denied it and the lab later found his DNA in a sexual context, that denial would destroy his credibility. At first, he insisted no. Tracy was his girlfriend's cousin. He said he never even saw her that way. But under pressure, James cracked and changed his story. He now claimed that after leaving the dealership, he, Tanya, and Tracy had all gone back to Tracy's house and had consensual sex together. When it was over, he said, he and Tanya went home and Tracy was fine. He explained that he'd hidden this from investigators only because he didn't want to embarrass Tanya. With his gun at the scene and this sudden new version of events, detectives were convinced they were closer to the truth, but not the whole truth. They arrested James, and because Tanya had backed up his earlier alibi, they arrested her as well for providing false information. Then they waited for the lab results. For weeks, the DNA results were delayed. Then out of nowhere, detectives got a call from the jail. An inmate wanted to talk about Tracy's murder. He told officers that Tanya had confessed to him. According to this inmate, Tanya said that she and James went into Tracy's home together. Tanya gave a signal, James attacked Tracy, and the two of them took turns sexually assaulting her at gunpoint before James killed her. The inmate wrote down the statement. Whether he was exaggerating or not, detectives saw an opportunity. They decided to bluff. They brought James in again and read the statement, but changed the wording so it sounded like Tanya herself had turned on him and was ready to testify in court. They added one more hook. If he confessed and showed real remorse, there might be a chance he'd avoid prison entirely. It was a lie, but psychologically, it worked. James broke, and what he said next stunned everyone. According to James, he and Tanya had only been together about a month before the murder, but they instantly bonded over two things: drugs and crime shows. They spent nights binge-watching CSI crime scene investigation. In one episode, two brothers kidnap a woman, torture her, and kill her. That storyline became more than entertainment. James told detectives he'd always fantasized about doing something like that. Tanya, instead of being horrified, was into it. She said she also wanted to kidnap, torture, sexually abuse, and murder a woman. From there, they started planning. At first, they talked about snatching a random woman from a supermarket parking lot, but they decided it was too risky. Too many cameras, too many witnesses. So they made a colder choice. They would pick someone they knew, someone who trusted them. That way, it would be easier to get inside her home and control her. They chose Tracy. She trusted Tanya. She was grateful that Tanya had helped her get the nursing job. She was trying to rebuild her life, unaware that two people close to her were turning her into a target. In the days leading up to the attack, James deliberately cut back on drugs so he'd be clear enough to drive and carry out their plan. One day they drove Tracy home intending to act, but she didn't invite them inside. Then came the day of the murder. After the paychecks, the bank, and the car lot, they finally got the opening they wanted. Next half, when they dropped Tracy off that day, everything looked ordinary. Just paychecks, the bank, a used car lot, and then home. No one watching them would have guessed this was the moment James and Tanya had been building toward. According to James, as they pulled up, he casually told Tracy he needed to use the bathroom. She trusted both of them and let them in without a second thought. Tracy and Tanya stood in the living room talking about normal things: work, money, the car Tracy hoped to buy, the future she was trying to rebuild. She had no idea the two people beside her weren't sharing those thoughts. They were waiting for their chance. James walked down the hallway toward the bathroom. The apartment was quiet. No shouting neighbors, no loud TV. Just an ordinary, calm afternoon. That's when Tanya gave the signal. She turned to Tracy and, without warning, slapped her across the face. It wasn't about anger. It was the cue they had agreed on. The line between fantasy and reality vanished in a single blow. James rushed out of the bathroom and attacked. Tracy, surprised and outnumbered, quickly lost consciousness. Investigators later noted there was no argument, no buildup. This began as a planned ambush. James said they carried Tracy into the bedroom. This was someone who had eaten with them, laughed with them, trusted them. Now they treated her like a prop in a scenario they had imagined together. In the bedroom, they stripped her and waited for her to wake up. When she did, she was already trapped. At gunpoint, they forced her to do what they wanted. The handgun later found near her body had already done its job. It kept her terrified and under their control. Both Tanya and James sexually assaulted her in extremely violent, degrading ways. Detectives and prosecutors later described the details as some of the worst they had ever seen. Even seasoned investigators struggled with the case. Many specifics were kept out of public record, not to spare the killers, but to preserve what dignity they could for Tracy. What makes this even more chilling is that it wasn't a sudden explosion of rage or a robbery gone wrong. By James's own admission, this was something he and Tanya had talked about, fantasized about, and deliberately chosen to commit. Tracy was not random. She was the target. Eventually, they moved to what James called the final part of the plan, the killing. There was never a version of this where Tracy survived to tell anyone what had happened. James took out a knife and stabbed her multiple times in the throat and back. He claimed that as he did it, he told her he was sorry, that it wasn't her fault, but that she had to die. Those words stayed with detectives. It sounded like an attempt to ease his own conscience, even as he continued the attack. When it was over, Tracy lay on the bedroom floor, exactly where her landlord would later find her. A woman who had survived divorce, loss, and financial hardship died not at the hands of a stranger, but because two people she trusted decided her death would complete their fantasy. Afterward, James and Tanya tried to clean up. They wiped at visible blood, moved through the small apartment, and made quick decisions they thought would keep them from being caught. They showered together in Tracy's bathroom, washing off the physical evidence as if that could wash away what they'd done. Part of their plan, according to James, was to burn the apartment afterward to destroy evidence, an idea taken straight from the crime shows they loved. But when they stepped outside and saw neighbors around, they abandoned that step. There were too many eyes nearby, so they left. They walked away and left Tracy's body on the bedroom floor, the gun near her, the knife's damage visible on her body, and their DNA all over the scene. Their belief that they were clever enough to get away with it was already crumbling. Back at Tanya's home, they did not fall apart in guilt or panic. James said they had sex again, still charged by the violence they had committed. For investigators, that detail showed just how twisted their bond had become. This wasn't regret. It was an extension of the same fantasy, carried on in private. When the lab finally processed the evidence, whatever confidence they had left was gone. James's and Tanya's DNA was everywhere. On Tracy, in the bedroom, and on items throughout the apartment. Blood, biological material, fibers, and fingerprints all supported what James later confessed. The story they modeled after crime shows had become a real murder. And now both his confession and the physical evidence told the same story. They planned it, they did it, and they left a trail that science could easily follow. It took almost 4 years for the case to reach trial. In 2014, James finally faced a jury. By then, Tracy's family had been living with grief and unanswered questions for years. Prosecutors went for the death penalty. They argued this was more than murder. It was calculated, cruel, and carried out by two people who exploited a victim's trust. They walked the jury through the planning, the visit to the apartment, the attack, the killing, and the attempted cleanup. They backed it with DNA, medical evidence, and James's own detailed confession. The defense focused on his past. They described a childhood marked by a mother who used drugs, sold herself, disappeared for long stretches, and left James and his sister alone and hungry. They talked about instability, violence, his mother's murder, and years of drug use and crime. The message was clear. He didn't come from nowhere. He was shaped by trauma. But they couldn't argue that he hadn't done it. The evidence was too strong. Instead, they asked the jury to spare his life and sentence him to life in prison without parole. A psychological evaluation became crucial. Experts concluded that despite everything in his background, James knew right from wrong. He understood death and pain. When he and Tanya planned, carried out, and tried to cover up Tracy's murder, he knew exactly what he was doing. The jury listened to all of it: the tragic childhood, the brutal crime, the expert opinions. In the end, they found him guilty and agreed he should receive the ultimate punishment. James was sentenced to death. From there, the case moved into years of appeals. His lawyers challenged parts of the trial and the sentence. Each new filing meant Tracy's family had to hear his name again, see documents again, and risk the chance that his punishment might be changed. Most appeals failed. Courts upheld the verdict. But in 2018, his attorney secured a new hearing focused only on his sentence, a chance to argue for life instead of death. Then James made a choice no one expected. He told his lawyer to stop. He said he deserved to die. Whether that came from remorse, exhaustion, or something else, it effectively cleared the way for his execution. Tanya's path was different. Prosecutors offered her a deal: testify against James in exchange for life in prison instead of the death penalty. She accepted. On the stand and at sentencing, she cried, apologized, and said she was sorry for what had happened to Tracy and her family. Tracy's relatives did not believe her. Trish, the childhood best friend who had once been inseparable from both Tracy and Tanya, sat through every hearing. She watched the girl she had grown up with admit to helping plan and commit a murder. Afterward, Trish said she believed Tanya had been jealous of Tracy for years, jealous of how people loved her and how she kept going despite everything. To Trish, the tears in court were not proof of change. They were just another act. In April 2025, James's death sentence was carried out by lethal injection. For nearly 15 years, Tracy's name had been tied to court cases and appeals. That day brought a grim final chapter. In his final words, James said he had avoided speaking Tracy's name for 15 years because he thought it would be disrespectful. But in the end, he said it. "Tracy, forgive me." Whether that meant anything to the people who loved her is doubtful. No last statement can undo what was done in that apartment or give back the years her daughter spent without her mother. This case is about trust turned into a weapon. Tracy wasn't killed by a stranger. She was killed by her cousin and a man inside her circle, people she let in willingly. It's also about fantasy crossing the line into reality. The crime shows James and Tanya watched were meant as entertainment, but they treated them like a blueprint. Trauma, addiction, and jealousy may explain parts of their lives, but they don't excuse what they chose to do to Tracy. The real-life sentence falls on the people left behind: her daughter, her family, and friends like Trish, who lost both Tracy and the Tanya they thought they knew. In the end, Tracy's story isn't just about how she died, but how she lived, caring for others as a nurse, saving to visit her daughter, and trying to rebuild after loss. Refusing to let her be just a character in their twisted fantasy is one way to honor who she truly was. If you've watched this far, you're someone who values careful, respectful deep dives into real cases, not just shot clips and headlines. Support Crime and Nest by subscribing, hitting the like button, and turning on the notification bell so you never miss a future upload. Drop a comment below. What do you think pushed James and Tanya from fantasy into action? And were there warning signs people around them might have missed or dismissed? Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting Crime and Nest. And don't forget to share this video with someone who follows true crime.